So Chair, did you ask for a, sorry, a little bit. Did you ask for a roll call?
Oh, yes, please. I apologize.
No, that's fine. Okay, Jackson?
Here.
Galassi?
Present.
Matsuno?
Here.
McNerney? Tainer?
Here.
Aziz?
Here.
And Chair Caldwell.
Did we lose our chairman?
Chair Caldwell, you there? He looks frozen.
Looks frozen.
I see him.
I'm here. I think everybody keeps freezing on me a little bit. Lena, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay.
Mhm.
The more people on these Zoom calls, the more chance it's going to freeze.
Oh,
Yeah,
it looks like it's freezing again.
okay.
Oh,
Oh, okay, we lost.
we lost you.
Yeah, I can hear you. I turned off my camera.
Okay,
Can you hear me okay?
yes, yes.
Okay.
Oh my God, this is so awesome. Hey guys, it's Jason.
So we
Hall.
can move on to, Chair, we can move on to salute to the flag. if you'd like.
Yes, Commissioner Jackson, would you mind leading us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Jackson. Item D is approval of order of the agenda. I've not received any requests to take anything out of order. So I would entertain a motion to approve the order of the agenda.
I will so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Shall we do a roll call?
Yes, we can do a roll call. Jackson,
Yes.
Galassi,
Yes.
Matsuno,
Here. Oh, yes. Right.
Tainer,
Yes.
Aziz,
Yes.
and Chair Caldwell.
Yes. And so we shall move on to the blue folder items, additional backup materials. We did all receive an email, I believe, at 4. Project.
Okay, you broke out again, Chair.
I apologize. Today. And it was an email in support of the Catalina Village project. And so I would entertain a motion to receive and file the blue folder items.
Was it only in favor of, because I saw other letters as well.
Yeah, I believe you have to roll both.
Oh, okay, I apologize.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think there were like four letters.
Yes.
Earlier today.
And
Is there a motion to receive and file?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion.
And a second?
I
I'll
believe
second the motion.
Matsuno seconded. I can do a roll.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Jackson,
Here. Yes. Yes.
Galassi,
Yes.
Matsuno,
Yes.
Tainer,
Yes.
Aziz,
Yes.
and Chair Caldwell.
Yes. So that would bring us to our consent calendar. We do have one item under consent. It's F1. It's the approval of the affidavit of posting for the Preservation Commission special meeting of April 18th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make
I'll move
that
that we
motion.
approve.
I'll make the
Commissioner
motion.
Jackson, I think I heard you first.
Okay.
Is Commissioner Matsuno, would you
I'll
like to
second.
second?
I'll
Thank you
second.
very much.
Okay, Jackson,
Yeah, yes.
Galassi,
Yes.
Matsuno,
Yes.
Tainer,
Yes,
Aziz,
Yes.
Chair Caldwell.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for everybody bearing with me. It looks like I'm having some internet issues, but hopefully you can hear me. That brings up item G, excluded consent calendar items. We do not have any, which would bring us to public participation on non-agenda items. Are there any requests to speak on any non-agendized items?
Chair, there are no requests to speak on non-agenda items, and let me just check e-comment real quick. And there are no e-comments on non-agenda items as well.
Thank you very much. Item I, ex parte communication. Do any members of the commission have anything to report under ex parte communication?
No.
Chair, if I may,
Yes, please.
I just wanted to bring to the commission's attention that the city of Redondo Beach is currently looking for repurposing proposals for the old library in Veterans Park. And, I think I just want to leave it to a general knowledge of the commission of how much we as the Preservation Commission believe that we should be involved in that. Currently, as far as I know, I think Stacy can correct me on that. It's being run by the Community Development Department, and they just had a meeting, single agenda meeting last week with the Recreation and Parks Commission. And I actually participated and I commented as an individual private citizen rather than a preservation commissioner. There is another meeting, I believe it's in May, which will take with the Cultural Arts Commission or Public Arts Commission. But I had also participated in the past in a city council meeting where this item came along. I don't want to take too long of a time of this meeting, but for those of you who don't know what we are talking about, it's the old library building in Veterans Park, which has been idle for about 3 years because the people who ran it as a event venue, they ran out of business. It's a gorgeous, amazing building, and it's a national landmark. So at some point, I believe our commission needs to get involved in the future use of that building, and there are some ideas about things like that. But I just wanted to give everybody here an early heads up, that's all. And thank you for your time.
When was the next meeting on that? You said in May?
Yeah, I don't have it, but it is basically a public arts commission meeting, which they will convene with the single agenda, because one of the ideas of I'm actually a proponent of is actually to turn it into an art museum, but there are some bunch of other ideas and so on and so forth. I think if Stacy would be kind enough to coordinate with the people at the public, community relations department, and let us know about when the next meetings are. If anybody is interested individually, I think it would be worthwhile attending those meetings, because it is, I think, from the preservation point of view, it definitely is the jewel of Redondo Beach, together with the fig tree next to it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that, Commissioner Tainer. Antonio and I have been involved with the library. We did walk the library last year just to assess the general condition of that building. And the Community Services Department and Public Works that they maintain and that they're looking for adaptive reuse for future users. What we can do is we can take this as a referral to staff and provide further information to you as that evolves, and also update you regarding their upcoming meetings.
Thank you very much, Stacy. And yeah, we could maybe revisit this item under N when we get to the towards the end of the agenda. Is there anything else to report on under ex parte communication? Okay. Well, then we'll move to item J, which is our public hearings. And Stacy, do we have any members of the public that will be testifying this evening?
We do have the applicant present. The applicant's team is here, as well as representatives from Kaplan Chen Kaplan and Rincon Consultants. Lena, did anybody else sign on?
We do have 2 members of the public that registered but have not signed on as of yet.
And I just want to also recognize we do have our attorney present too, that will be able to respond to questions as well.
Okay. Well, at this to testify. So will all those individuals who wish to provide testimony with respect to the public hearing on the agenda this evening rise and take the following oath?
So Kate and Jason.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. And I'll state the oath. Do each of you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be nothing but the truth?
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing but the truth.
Well, thank you very much. Then this is the time and place to conduct a public hearing to consider item J1. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll motion to open the public hearing, Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
I second the chair.
Okay. A motion and a second have been made to open the public hearing. Are there any objections? Hearing none, it is so ordered. And if we could have the staff report on item J1.
Of course. So this project includes the formation of historic district, various requests for certificate of appropriateness, and a request for a historic variant for reduced commercial parking. The project site is located on the east side of North Catalina Avenue. It's between Diamond and Emerald Streets. It consists of 6 parcels that are approximately 1.2 acres in size. There are 5 existing commercial buildings totaling 15,682 square feet. This area is zoned R3A multifamily residential, but because it was originally zoned commercial, this area is considered legal non-conforming. Oops, excuse me. Went all the way to the end. Here we go. Here's the survey for the site. You can see on the left-hand side, this is 132 North Catalina Avenue. This was the original blacksmith shop. Here we have 126 that was most recently Catalina Coffee. The adjacent dry cleaning facility at 124. This is 116, that's a carpenter's business. And this is 112, which is the 2-story Masonic Lodge. And here's the surface parking lot at the corner of Emerald and Catalina.
Thanks.
Here are the sites as they exist today. This is the original blacksmith shop and the shed to the north of that building. You've got the surface parking lot between the blacksmith shop at 132 and then the Catalina Coffee site at 126. Here's the front view of Catalina Coffee. And then here's the dry cleaning facility at 124. Down here, you can see 116 North Catalina Avenue. And then finally, here is that Masonic Lodge. And then to the right of that is the surface parking lot at the corner. The project proposes removing one of the 5 buildings. It's the one at 116 North Catalina Avenue. And with the 4 remaining, they hope to form a historic district. With those 4 buildings, they hope to modify and adaptively reuse each of those structures. The existing surface parking lot adjacent to Catalina Coffee at 126 would become outdoor dining towards the front of that lot and then residential towards the rear. The project proposes building 30 residential units behind the proposed district, as well as adjacent to the Masonic Lodge, with 4 of those units being listed for affordable. So 22 units would be behind the historic district and 8 units would be inside and adjacent to the Masonic Lodge at 112 North Catalina Avenue. Here's the proposed site plan. You can see the driveway access coming along here just north of the blacksmith shop, around the back to the 22 residential units and through the front here. You've got the blacksmith shop here that would become a tasting room. Here's your outdoor dining space. The buildings at 126 and 124 would jointly become a coffee shop and a snack shop together. Here you have that driveway. This is the Masonic Lodge, which would be adaptively reused for residential. And then you have the residential addition to the south, which goes into the existing surface parking lot at the corner. Here are the renderings showing the historic district. This is the tasting room, that's the blacksmith shop, outdoor dining, coffee shop, and snack shop here. Down here, you can see the Masonic Lodge and the new residential to the side. Of course, you can see the residential outline towards the rear of these structures. An environmental impact report was prepared for the project. The technical aspects of the report would be reviewed by the Planning Commission later this week. The main focus for the Preservation Commission is the Cultural Resources chapter. Chen Kaplan had prepared the historic resource evaluation as well as the historic preservation plan. And of course, the certificate of appropriateness applications are the way in which we document how each of those project pieces meets the Secretary of Interior standards. And that in and of itself is the environmental clearance for the project. And then going forward, there would be ongoing historic review by the project team during all phases of construction. So this site is located within the original town site. Per the early Sanborn maps, development within this block took place as early as 1895. There are several local landmarks in this area, including 305 Emerald down here in this photo, which is the Oklahoma Apartments. There are the Vincent Apartments over on North Broadway, just east of this project site. And towards the northeast are the Diamond Street Apartments. And those are the first local landmark for the city. Because of investments by Henry Huntington and others, there was a lot of financial support for development in this lower part of the city, as well as with the railroad. The Redondo Railroad track actually came through these properties diagonally from Diamond Street down to South Catalina towards the train depot. So the historic district would include 4 buildings. The first one is 112 North Catalina Avenue, which is the Masonic Hall built by the Masons in 1904. At least 16 different local groups gathered here, and the assembly room is still within the structure today. Per the evaluation, the site is not only eligible for local landmark designation, but also for natural register. And it's based less on the architecture and more on the early use of this building. The site at 124 North Catalina Avenue was a dry cleaning retail facility. It's constructed in 1946, and this is a typical mid-century vernacular storefront. While not significant architecturally, it is considered to be a good contributing building to a historic district. The structure at 126 North Catalina Avenue, most recently the Catalina Coffee Company, was also a dry cleaning facility, and that was constructed in 1949. This has mid-century modern features along the front elevation, including the Googie style curved canopy along the front elevation. Because of this architecture, it is eligible for local landmark designation. And then lastly, 132 North Catalina Avenue is the original blacksmith shop. It was built in 1905. It is heavily modified. It has been used for industrial uses over the years. It's currently utilized as a retail business. The evaluation notes that it is a good building as a contributor to a historic district. I wanted to show you some photos of the assembly room that's located on the second floor of the Masonic Lodge. You can see that space, and there's actually some original equipment still installed on the wall. This is looking eastward. This is a photo looking westward with the windows behind me. And then also down here, it's tough to see, but this is the original cornerstone of the building. The building had been remodeled, I think it was in 1993, but luckily they did not cover up this plaque created by the Masons. This is inside the blacksmith shop, currently a retail business. You can see the machinery and the pulleys are still there today. So 112 and 132, the assembly hall and the rail service, those buildings are tied to the earliest years of development of the city. 124 and 126, they represent the shift from those industrial uses to resident serving commercial uses. Per the evaluation, these four buildings together exemplify and reflect the special elements of the city's social, commercial, architectural, and transportation history. Now we get into the certificate of appropriateness applications. First, we're going to discuss the removal of 116 North Catalina Avenue. This site was originally developed in 1921. It's just a small commercial building, but in 1925, they added a duplex. There were a variety of alterations over the years, which removed its original historic character. For that reason, there is low architectural integrity for the structure, and there's no significant sign of workmanship. The building is not connected with significant people or events, and the removal of this structure would allow for new driveway access to the rear residential units. The building at 112 North Catalina Avenue is that Masonic Lodge. It would be adaptively reused for residential units. About 20% of the rear of the building is to be removed. There will be new windows along the north elevation as well as the east. There will be new decks on the rear east elevation. And unfortunately, as part of this project, the assembly hall would be removed. But they would be restoring the front facade. They will be adding the cornice back in as well as a horizontal banding. There will be 4 units inside the building and then 4 units stretching within the addition to the south into that surface parking lot at the corner with Emerald Street. So for 124 and 126 North Catalina Avenue, those 2 buildings will become a cohesive coffee and snack shop. The rear of those buildings will have the removal of approximately 66% of the existing square footage. For 124, the dry cleaning facility, there will be new windows on the south elevation, as well as the addition of a stone bulkhead, which would be similar to but differentiated from the stone bulkhead that is on the front elevation now. For 126, which is the Catalina Coffee site, we will be maintaining the mid-century modern curved canopy. There is an inappropriate office addition that took place along the front elevation that would be removed, and there would be new windows in its place. And then the parking lot to the north would become jointly outdoor dining as well as rear residential. Lastly, 132 North Catalina, which is the blacksmith shop, that would be adaptively reused to a tasting room. About 49% of the rear of that building would be removed. The shed along the north elevation would be removed in order to create driveway access to the rear residential. And the applicants propose that a mural be provided on that northern elevation. There will also be new transom windows as well as horizontal wood siding around the building. And then the industrial machinery and pulleys will be retained at the site. So the project proposes 30 new residential units. There will be 22 units behind the historic district, 8 units inside and next to the lodge building at 112 North Catalina Avenue. The applicant proposes California coastal architectural style for these units. It will include horizontal wood as well as board and batten siding, decorative shutters, and awnings. The residential building heights vary, but are approximately 32 to 35 feet in height. In comparison, the blacksmith shop at 132 is approximately 19 feet in height. The dry cleaning and retail coffee shops are approximately 15 feet in height. And then the Masonic Hall is approximately 32 feet in height. So the corner residential, which is that surface parking lot at the corner of Emerald and Catalina, would have similar massing and height as the Masonic Hall at 112. The rear residential behind the historic district would be over 30 feet behind the front property line. And this would allow all of the residential buildings proposed within the historic district to be fully visible from the block face. Because there's no dominant architectural style within the district, the California coastal style would not detract from this group of buildings. Redondo is generally eclectic in style. And because it's California coastal, it would clearly differentiate between the old buildings and the new structures. Here are the renderings showing the blacksmith shop that will become a tasting room. Yeah, this outdoor dining here. Here's our coffee shop with snack shop, rear residential behind. Here's another view of the outdoor dining and the coffee shop and snack shop with the Masonic Lodge down over there on the right-hand side. And then here's the Masonic Lodge and the corner residential towards Emerald Street. Here are a couple of sections just to give you an idea of massing and height. Here's a section through the front coffee shop. You have the townhome immediately behind that. This is the driveway in between the structures. Here's the rear townhome and then the rear 15-foot setback with the Broadway properties on the left-hand side. Here's that tasting room up front, the townhome right behind that, driveway here, rear townhomes, and again, the 15-foot rear setback. The project also includes a historic variance for reduced commercial parking. The 30 residential units will be fully parked. However, the adaptive reuse of the commercial buildings and the creation of outdoor dining would result in the removal of the existing surface parking lots at the site. Only 5 spaces would be available for the tasting room and the coffee snack shops. The mitigation monitoring and reporting program does include a variety of measures that including but not limited to the transit subsidies for project residents, commuter incentives for project employees, as well as local hire considerations. Here you can see the chart that's included in the staff report. This is the breakdown per the municipal code for what amount of parking would be required for each of the structures and the uses. For the tasting room, 18 parking spaces would be required. For the coffee shop, 7 parking spaces would be required. And lastly, for that outdoor dining space, 12 parking spaces would be required, which would result in a total of 37 required commercial parking spaces. Staff recommends that the Preservation Commission review the proposed applications and related materials, take public testimony and close the public hearing, make a determination regarding the request for the formation of a historic district and the requests for a certificate of appropriateness, and lastly, make a recommendation to the Planning Commission regarding the historic variance for reduced commercial parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Do any members of the commission have any questions of staff before we move to public comment?
Do these come before or after statements from the public, EJ?
Well, I didn't know if anybody had any initial questions. We can easily allow questions afterwards as well, including after we close the public hearing.
I guess the one specific question comes to mind is that after the removal of the one building, so we've got 4 structures, right?
There are 5 existing, and then 1 would be removed for 4 structures.
So who actually would have ownership of all these additional structures?
You mean who ultimately would own the buildings within the historic district?
Yes.
That's a good question for the applicant.
Okay.
Right, we would.
Who's we?
Beach City Capital, I'm the owner of Beach City Capital. I'm a local developer here in South Bay.
And then I saw that Commissioner Aziz, did you have a question?
Yes, I was curious to know a little bit more about the impact it would have on 305 Emerald. Is that a building that is currently historically designated, and does it have designation at all, or have they applied for designation? I'm guessing it's the Oklahoma apartments from what I understand.
That's correct. It is locally designated, yes. And it is a part of the assessment prepared by Kaplan Chen Kaplan to determine that there would be no adverse impacts to that property.
Thank you.
Jason, you said that your company would own the buildings. Did you purchase the land from one of the from one or more of the people who own the existing buildings?
Right, we have the project in escrow now with anticipation of closing escrow midsummer. So yes, we're anticipating acquiring all the properties once we've completed our entitlement process.
So there are multiple people who you're purchasing the properties from.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, with that, why don't we have those in favor, please provide any testimony that you have for the commission. And
Excuse me, Chair Caldwell?
Yes.
Sorry, looks like Commissioner Matsuno may have questions. He had his hand up.
Oh, I apologize.
So the 112, the Masonic Lodge, and then the Ironworks buildings, they're considered, I guess they will be designated historic structures. I'm just wondering, because the other projects that we've reviewed, there was always this attention to preserving the structure. And in this case, because they've been so altered, I'm wondering what the guidelines are that are being used to determine the architectural style of the remodel restoration. How is that determined, and are we in any way meant to kind of have a say or oversee or approve that?
Right. This is all up for discussion and at the commission's discretion. Within the evaluation and the preservation plan, you can see that those two specific structures are not considered architecturally significant, but are significant based upon their uses. So the preservation consultant reviewed the proposed exterior alterations and materials to see if they would at least be cohesive as part of the historic district and not detract from the other buildings, such as the mid-century modern structure, to make sure that it all is a cohesive district. But yes, those exterior materials and all of those alterations are what you're reviewing tonight.
Okay, so I'm kind of confused, a little bit confused about that. The coffee shop has this mid-century style. So when we talk about cohesiveness, it's not a historical style of cohesion. It's just, I'm just kind of curious that I guess I don't understand what the criteria are for the changes being made to these historical buildings in a historical district.
That's a great question that you have, Mr. Matsuno. I think that will be best answered by one of the staff members, Pam in particular, with Kaplan Chen Kaplan. But before we move into hearing from them, we just want to see if there's any other questions, and maybe we can hear from the applicant.
Okay.
In their presentation, they may cover some of your questions that you may have. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Let's do this.
I'm happy to provide an introduction as well as have our consultant expert present for the body here, and happy to answer any questions. It might be helpful to for us to shed some light on the purpose, the challenges, and what we've been able to accomplish, as well as allowing for the expert to kind of walk us through the historical preservation plan.
Absolutely.
Will help inform, maybe answer some questions you guys might have.
Yeah, so let's pause there for a second, because I see that Commissioner Aziz also has his hand up still. Just want to field any preliminary questions first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Antonio. Just to kind of clarify, Unit 136, is this a unit that would be still standing or would be raised?
136 is outside of the project scope, and that would remain in place.
Okay, thank you.
I think with that, I think we've answered some of the preliminary questions. Maybe we can go ahead and open the public at this point and maybe hear from the applicant and their team.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that great presentation, Stacy, and all the hard work that the team has done thus far. My name is
Jason. Can you hold just a minute? Do we need a motion to open public hearing?
I apologize.
Yeah. No, I thought,
We did that right before my
Yeah,
presentation.
that occurred already. Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nope,
Okay.
thank you.
Sorry, I'm sorry for the interruption.
no worries. I'm used to it. No, I'm just playing. I'll give a quick introduction, maybe a couple of minutes, and then I'd love to introduce Pam, who is our expert at Kaplan & Kaplan, who has been paramount to guide us through this process, along with Stacy, with the planning staff and Antonio. First of all, this has been about 48 months in the making, so I hope you feel the pain there. So I would have to say that, what's the purpose? What was our purpose, right? When we first initially looked at the site and kind of what was the intention of the site. And so, first of all, my name is Jason Muller. I'm the founder and CEO of Beach City Capital. Born and raised here in the South Bay. I live in Redondo Beach. You might have seen me at Trader Joe's or Topaz. Kate Hirsch is my partner. She lives here in South Bay as well. We both have 2 kids each and families that we're raising here. I went to USC, and our company is here based in South Bay. And so the purpose of this project was to redevelop this key location in Redondo Beach. I think it's a very important location. It's also to protect the historical buildings here, to provide for rent housing, also to clean up the contaminated soils, right? And to utilize my talents and do some hard work to showcase Redondo Beach as an investable city, to improve the image at USC and UCLA. I went to USC. And so you might ask what happened. So the owners of this property were having difficulty courting developers, because all developers were saying that the best way to go about the site is to go with the zoning, which would be to demo everything and build for sale townhomes, right? And nobody wanted to deal with the historical district, the contaminated soils alike, right? And so my approach was a little bit different. I'm local. I have pride in this city. And I didn't do anything prolific. I literally came with a sketch, a piece of paper, and I called a meeting, and I literally asked, Aaron Jones and Antonio, what would you guys like to see here, right? And the concert answer was, we'd like to protect these historical buildings. And so we suggested, to take the path less traveled and preserve these buildings by providing some type of historical overlay. And with that, I felt like we had a handshake agreement to move forward. And it felt good. And we were thinking we could build the buildings behind, the residential buildings behind these historical buildings instead of on top, right? Also clean the soils, and then work to fit this project into its urban context, right? And after 38 months of hard work, working with some of the best consultants, which I'll introduce in a second, as well as working with the diligent staff in Redondo Beach, we were able to work really hard on the site plan, the design. Once we hit our, we did our CEQA consultants. By the way, I'm going to kind of misspeak a little bit. Sometimes Antonio corrects me with the technical words and stuff, but we didn't fully qualify for a lot of the national designation. And so what we did is we worked really hard to figure out how we can get a local designation. And we worked really hard to do a very detailed preservation plan, right? And a lot of people look at historical significance as a burden. I looked at it as an opportunity. I just delivered a historical project in Hermosa Beach. You might have read about it. Like, I love historical buildings. I love the nostalgic feeling. It's good for our community. With that, we were able to work with Kaplan and Pam, and she will share the rich history of the the old red car terminus, blacksmith shop, the great Masonic temple where the fraternal order used to gather to help build the city and have great ideas. We chose to preserve the historical significance of these buildings rather than maximize our profits, right? Because we felt like this could be the genesis and like the nucleus of this project. It gave it character. And the initial idea was, hey, let's do a historical overlay. And what we could do is we can provide a parking variance in order to save as many of the buildings as possible. And I'll digress here by saying is that the more buildings that we preserved, the more parking that was required. And so it was a balance of what was required and what we can preserve. And so that was the key and the challenge that we were able to overcome. And we would love to be able to celebrate our accomplishments over the last 48 months, because we've been able to fine tune this with the best consultants and with the city in order to find a balance between preserving these buildings, the parking, the affordable housing, cleaning up the soils, and having a beautiful project. So I hope that was a helpful introduction to the project. And with that, I'd love to introduce Pam, who's with Kaplan & Kaplan. She is the expert in historical preservation. She's also notably an ex-mayor of Santa Monica, which is a very diverse city that has its own challenges. And so she's very well respected. And I think that she has been paramount to us in guiding us through this process, working side by side with Stacy, Antonio, and our CEQA consultant. So with that, I'd love to introduce Pam and have her kind of introduce the project. Why is it significant, and what we have done to implement a historical preservation plan to help preserve these uses. So, thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Pam O'Connor with Kaplan & Kaplan, and I'm actually in Oceanside, California for some meetings, and I'm sitting outside in a parking lot, so I'm not going to be on camera with you guys, but I will be able to talk a bit about the project and certainly respond to your questions. I heard a portion of Stacy's presentation. She covered a lot of territory there. So I'll jump in though and start out by talking about why it's a historic district. And it's a historic district that, well, first of all, let me say there are very few commercial buildings from the first half of the 20th century that remain in Redondo Beach. So your commercial building stock is quite limited. But here on one block, you have 4 buildings that tell the story of the first half of the 20th century, with 2 of the buildings anchoring those first decade of the 20th century, and then the 2 other buildings right before 1950, the second half of that first half of the 20th century. So you have kind of the history of the evolution of architecture and styles in Redondo Beach. Now, one of the first buildings, the second building of those that was built is a 2-story building at 112 North Catalina. And that was an aspirational building. The Masons, they built a 2-story building for their needs, because on the second floor, there was an assembly area, a meeting space, but also they saw a great future and potential in Redondo Beach. Now, it didn't play out that the rest of the block did not get developed with similar types of buildings, but that sometimes happens in history. But it did develop with other commercial buildings. But that aspirational building was important in early Redondo Beach because the Masons who met there were a fraternal order that was instrumental in civic awareness and promoting civic participation in the city of Redondo Beach. And they were very generous. They let other organizations, other fraternal organizations, other women's groups use that space. Even when they moved out of that space and built their next hall, they still let other groups use that. So for at least the first 25, 30 years or so of the 20th century, that space, that building was used to grow Redondo Beach. Now, with that one too, I'll talk a little bit about the, as you know, the front facade has been altered, and that happened in 1993. But the building still has its basic 3 modules in the front. It still has that symmetrical, you can still see that symmetrical design. Now, we did find a photograph from 1993, a newspaper photograph that revealed and showed part of the building, that original building. So from that, we understand and can see that there had been a cornice, and that can be reestablished and restored. That there had been a window in the upper level of the middle section, and that's going to be replaced and restored. So there is work that can be done to bring that back to not just conjectural what it was, but based on the photograph that provides some data on what it looked like and an understanding of the architecture of the time to rehabilitate it and reconstruct portions of that building. Now going down the block, the other end of the block, I don't have the addresses in front of me, guys, and it's dark. So I'm just going to refer to the buildings, the blacksmith shop. So that one was built in 1904, another early 20th century building. And that tells the story of the industrial history of Redondo Beach. It served as a blacksmith store and ironworks, and it still retains some of that, the massing and the value, the front facade design of what a building, what typical buildings, industrial type buildings, and buildings related to the trains. In the train, there were train and transit operations going on, a yard that was just to the north of that. And it has both interesting interior pulley system that can be retained as an interesting artifact. Obviously, it's not operational now, it would not be. And the front of the building, the front facade has that stepped up kind of false front in a way, that is typical of Main Street stores and shops and blacksmiths and liveries in the early 20th century. So it retains that design. The other 2 buildings, then we jump to the 2 buildings in the middle that were done in the late 40s. One of them, the dry cleaners, that is not the one with the canopy, but the basic 1-story building that's rectangular, has a rectangular front facade, is an example of a vernacular retail building of the early half of the 20th century, 1940s. It retains a lot of the original features from the windows, the stacked stone bulkhead, the header ahead where signage goes, the horizontal cornice. So a lot of those elements remain and will be, and the windows. So that one has a fair amount of integrity, and it will be rehabilitated to integrate with the building next door to the north, which is a building that was also a dry cleaner facility and one that one could drive up to and drive through, and was eventually changed into a coffee shop. But that retains a lot of this mid-century modern expressionist flair of that coming out of World War II, and then the future of Redondo Beach in the mid-20th century as we were, as a nation, recovering from war and saw, a future that was very optimistic. So that has that expressive canopy, the pylon sign has a lot of original character-defining features, the slanted, canted windows on the front that return a bit on the side. Now, the back of both of those two 1940s buildings were industrial shops where they did the dry cleaning. So from that front portion back is just the straight walls without any architectural details, without any interior spaces that are meaningful. There were open spaces that held machinery and equipment to do the dry cleaning. So those back of the house areas are less significant. And then as a historic district, think of this as that streetscape. It's a streetscape that runs most of the block that tells the story, again, of the first half of the 20th century Redondo Beach commercial development. So there's a lot of interpretation, too, that can be done to tell this story and share it with future generations about the history of Redondo Beach in the first half of the 20th century. So we did prepare a preservation plan. And one of the things, and based on the conceptual drawings, we're able to look at the plans and identify and work with them, with the team, to make sure that they're on a track to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards, which is basically do no harm to what is historic. Don't do conjectural rehabilitation, but base it on what facts you find, and then to adaptively reuse those buildings and those spaces and integrate them into new development. So we were able to, going through the conceptual level plans and that presentation, that document is in your staff report, talks about that. Now, going forward, those ideas, which now are in the conceptual stage, will have to go through further design development, ultimately the construction drawings. So during that period, a historic architect will be part of the team to help work with, as part of the team, to make sure that what is being done to rehabilitate the buildings and to adaptively reuse them preserves and respects the existing historic fabric and makes the reconstruction of the areas that will need some reconstruction because they have lost some character. But again, based on factual knowledge, we can know that it can be brought up to what it looked like based on, again, both knowledge of the history as well as documentation such as a photograph of the two-story building. And so the historic architect would be part of that team to ensure along the way that it meets the Secretary of the Interior standards. And then as we go into as the project goes into construction, the historic architect would also be monitoring the construction to make sure that any of the existing historic fabric is protected and is not lost by mistake, through construction or accidents or anything, that, to ensure, again, through that regular monitoring of the site. And as you know, during construction, there'll be unknown conditions that come up that have to be addressed. And giving the historic architect on board will help to, as any decisions like that might have to be made, find the right path forward that respects the fabric of the building, that will help rehabilitate the building and result in a successful project that preserves the buildings, tells the story of the history of Redondo Beach commercial from the beginning of the 20th century to the first half of it, the beginning in the first decade through the last decade of the first half, the 1940s, and tells that story of commercial development while creating a vibrant space, a space that will both house people and will be used by residents from around the community as they walk and enjoy both the nearby beachfront, and will revitalize that area. So it is a win-win with respect to historic preservation and the adaptive reuse of the buildings. So that's, I conclude now.
Thank you very much, Pam. Excellent presentation. I appreciate that. I'd love to open up for questions, or Antonio, if you'd like to lead. I'm just asking if you guys have any questions. We actually requested Pam, for the benefit of the body here, in case you guys have any questions. After the 48 months of fine tuning, and making sure that we have a very well thought out preservation plan in order to preserve these historical resources for our generations to come to enjoy.
Thank you, and Pam, thank you as well. I'm hoping that maybe that did kind of address the Commissioner Matsuno's question. But, you know, we also, it looks like we have some questions from Commissioner Tainer, and but I want to hand it again over to the chair and to go ahead and fill the questions and you know, go through the regular procedural requirements we have here. So
Thank you.
I
Thank you very
didn't know
much.
if there was anything else that your team may want to add that we didn't cover.
CJ, I guess this would go to Pam and the whole team that you've got assembled. How many of the units are designed to go to low-income housing?
There's 4 units.
And how did you arrive at that number?
The state has a incentive program in order to provide affordable housing. And with that calculation, we've used that to arrive at that amount of units to set aside for affordable housing.
Is that formula, is it pretty well documented as to how to arrive at it? Maybe Antonio, you might be more.
That's definitely a question that we could respond to. It does tie into the entitlements that the Planning Commission is looking at, in particular the density bonus entitlement, and you know, setting aside some units for low or very low income households. It does grant the developer a bonus for units, and it does become somewhat of a puzzle to put together in balancing the other requirements. But it is, you know, with a project like this, setting aside those 4 units under the state density bonus law, they are allowed to take up to a 50% density bonus. But it is a separate entitlement that the Planning Commission is looking at. But that's a very good question that you have there. Unfortunately, it's not really under the purview of the Preservation Commission, but it is one of the entitlements.
Commissioner Tainer.
Hi, thank you, Chair. First of all, as a disclosure, I need to inform, I would love to inform my fellow commissioners that at the invitation of staff about a couple of months ago, I visited Jason and Kate at their offices and had a very long and very detailed briefing about the project. So I thank our staff and them for giving me, and perhaps maybe other commissioners, the opportunity. I like to add that I found Jason and Kate very enthusiastic, very detailed, and they obviously have done tremendous amount of work on this over the last 48 months. And I also realized that our staff did also a very thorough job on this particular project. Obviously, it's an important project for Redondo Beach, as exemplified by the fact that we are having a special meeting about it. Having said that, I think our job as commissioners is go very thoroughly through this project, because I think if and when finished, it will be a signature project for Redondo Beach. And just by coincidence, as I mentioned earlier, with the new functioning of the old library, it may just set the tone for the entire part of that part of our city, which is obviously very central. So after this introduction, I have 2 questions. The first one is a general one. I can definitely see that you are building everything, the new ones, in what you describe as the California coastal style, which is not part of any of the existing 4 buildings. So if I heard you correctly, you are doing this to build a backdrop for the historic buildings. So there will be a contrast. I would love for you or your architects to elaborate on what you mean with California coastal. Where else do we see California coastal within Redondo Beach or in the neighborhood? And maybe using some of the visuals, can you point out the certain elements of the California? The second question, let me ask you this in advance also. Just by looking on the plans, you are leaving a lot of space for outdoor dining, and even both for the tasting room, which in my vocabulary is a polite word for a drinking establishment or a bar, and then also the coffee shop. And that open space happens to be right in front of the residential buildings. And if I again understand correctly from the plans, those residential buildings will face directly that open space for eating and drinking. In the near future, if there is a issue raised by the residents living in those things, do you have a plan B about like either getting rid of that space or maybe perhaps enclosing it? So if you have given this part any thoughts, I would love to hear about it now. But again, my first question is, let's go a little bit on detail on what we mean with California coastal and why we should approve as Preservation Commissioner a California coastal style as part of the historic district. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Excellent question. I just want to go ahead and acknowledge that that was an ex parte communication. We want to, when we ask for towards the beginning of the meeting, if there was ex parte communications, including communications with the applicant, that's at the point where we should bring those up. But just wanted to make sure that the chair recognizes.
I'm sorry, Antonio. I did not understand what you just mentioned. Can you explain what? This was not the right time to bring this thing up?
Right. So typically the chair will ask if you had ex parte communication, so communications outside of the public hearing with other people regarding this agenda item. And that would have been the time for you to raise that you did meet with the applicant. So I just wanted to go ahead and have the chair acknowledge that that was the ex parte communications that you had with the development team. Does that make sense?
It doesn't make any sense to me. The fact that I mentioned it right now is not the right time, but.
No, it's fine. That's okay. I'm just, it's usually under item I that we should acknowledge that, but that's why I'm just pointing that out. Just for the sake of the record, the administrative record. I appreciate your comment, your question, and that is actually very relevant to what you're looking at today. The design is a key component for the certificate of appropriateness. So I think that's a very excellent question. But I just wanted to interrupt real quick and interject real quick on that.
Sure. If I may, thank you for that question. I'll give a quick response, bullet point response, and if Stacy would like to add any visuals or her perspective on that, I'd love to welcome that. But so the idea was to make sure that we're emphasizing the historical buildings. And if we were to create the same type of architecture, it would blend too much. So the idea was to let's provide something that could have a step back, first of all. So we're not building above the buildings, we're stepping back the development. And then we're also providing a different architectural style so that it can emphasize and embrace the architectural style of the historical district, right? Number one. So I think your point of the two architectural styles to emphasize that is right on. So that is an architectural and urban planning specific design challenge that we felt like we accomplished really well. Number one. Number two is that the buildings to the east are Craftsman style architecture, which have elements of coastal, plantation style architecture. The buildings to the south also have the same structure and style. The buildings to the west also have the style but those are a little bit more affordable. Were built in the 70s. So they didn't invest as much in the facades, but it still had the wood hardy board. It still had that same soft facade. An easy way to think about it is like a craftsman style architecture. The coastal plantation style architecture is very popular along the coast here in Redondo, Hermosa. And it has the white hardy board. It's a very homely feel. And so we literally looked at the urban context of the buildings that were literally next to the project. So we wanted to make sure that it fit within the urban fabric, not blocks or miles away, literally like the buildings like next to us. Even the historical building, like literally, Peter, you know, the one right next to it, like we actually took cues. Oh, I don't know. We just kind of like zoned in on it. We're like, oh, took some cues of that and like help it influence the architecture. I love architecture, and like I'm by the way, I'm traditionally trained as an architect, right? Then I went to SC for real estate. So does Kate. So there's no like coincidence that this project is high design, right? So every inch of this project, we used finesse in the design. So that was my answer, a brief answer to the emphasizing the different architectural styles to embrace the historical. And number two was the influence on the architecture was looking at the adjacent urban fabric, like literally the adjacent buildings. And that's kind of what urban planning at its best. So, and Stacey, if you'd like to add, or Antonio, I don't know.
No, I think that was perfectly acceptable. As it relates to, you know, the evaluation and the preservation plan, Pam had already talked about how, you know, the new portion would be differentiated from the historic district, and each of the buildings within the historic district have a unique style. So there's no dominant style. But you know, it's also a question to, you know, the architects team, if there were other buildings that served as inspiration within South Redondo.
Right. Thank you. And I think an important question, I appreciate these questions because that means that we care, right? I'm local here and I love Redondo Beach. And so this is my life. This is where I'm going to live and raise my kids. And, you know, as you guys could see, like outdoor, you know, indoor-outdoor dining is super important. And like, you'll see new developments will not build retail, not build new things. It's just very risky, right? And so in order to embrace and be able to provide like kind of like a risk mitigation for these buildings, for these businesses to be successful, we provided a very highly designed outdoor dining space that has hardscape, jacaranda trees, beautiful kind of like landscape architecture, right? And we have a sound wall, by the way. And so we have an acoustician that provided a sound wall in order to mitigate the risk. And this is a beer tasting room, right? So it's not like a bar. So it's more like a craft tasting room where you're actually like tasting like gourmet craft beers, right? And we're also partnering with the standing room. It's like a local like, you know, burger shop. I don't know if you've ate at the, like that liquor store. I mean, it's like a little, it sounds silly, but it's like amazing hamburgers. And so like the chef there and then the guy from you know, the Strand, they're kind of my friends. And so like we're putting together a team to provide craft beers and like craft and gourmet hamburgers for like a lunch kind of style, right? And it's really meant to be like the idea, and I'm going to add this here, was that like, you know, we understand the culture that Torrance is 0 mile and Santa Monica is 18 miles. So the bicyclists would always stop at the 2.3 mile mark and get sandwiches and coffees at the old Catalina Coffee. I used to go there with my pastor and talk about stuff. And we put, if you look at the design, there's so many bike racks, way more than required. And so we're like embracing that. And so the Kylie coffee shop is going to be like a breakfast pantry / coffee shop similar to like CJ's Pantry. I don't know if you guys had like that, seafood omelets there or whatever, but like that's kind of the idea where it's really busy at like 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., right? And then they kind of die down, kind of like, good stuff, if you will, like at 2 o'clock. And then so that courtyard's activated, right? So people can like enjoy the, outdoor living space or dining space, excuse me. And then the gourmet burger place is activated around noon to probably around 4, 5, 6 o'clock, right? And so that's kind of the business hours which we're anticipating. And so we're imagining that like they'll be shutting down around 8 o'clock, right? And so to be conducive with kind of work hours and stuff like that. But it's not really meant to be like a loud kind of, it's by design the way that we're doing it. And so that's kind of something that we feel that could be a great amenity because you guys, I'm sure there's literally 1,100 units across the street that don't have a place to walk for coffee. Like it's not, I mean, you could drive, but like to walk across the street to get gourmet coffee or whatever, like you can even do black coffee. I drink black coffee. That's amazing, right? To be able to like go get a gourmet burger and a craft beer with your wife or your best friend or whatever across the street, that's amazing. So our design and our intent is literally like the quarter-mile radius of all the people that live in that area. Like, how down at the pier, we love the pier, we love Naja's, we love Tony's. I mean, we love other stuff down there too, but it's very weather dependent. And when the wind kicks in, it's difficult. So it's nice to be up above in a protected corridor. And so we're hoping to be able to serve the local community, but I'm talking like within blocks. So I hope that answered your question. It might have been a little too long of an answer. Sorry.
My question is always going back to that the style, and I realize it's a fine line that I don't quite understand. Where you so you're proposing this sort of it's a historic district now, and yet you can't sort of overlay fake history on top of it. The way I see the plan when I'm looking at it, and first of all, I want to just thank you because I wish we had more developers that were so sensitive to the history and intent on preserving that. That's why we're here. And so I look at it and I kind of get the Ironworks building has kind of an industrial style, and then the coffee shop has sort of a mid-century style. The lodge looks to me kind of like moving towards like a Art Deco office building style.
You got it.
And so it's this sort of walk through history, and each one is distinct. I really like that. My question is that I was thinking in that Ironworks building, it was mentioned in the presentation that there's still some of the old machinery and stuff, and it might be sort of incorporated into the design. What would happen in the future if the tenants change and the use changes? Would they be able to intervene on that style, or does it become like a historic building that has to go through the Preservation Commission for exterior changes?
Once the district is formed, you have these 4 buildings within the district. The exteriors, however you see fit to approve them, would then be required to go under review if changes were made to them, which includes the fact that the machinery and pulleys are required to be retained within the original blacksmith shop. So all the elements that are identified as part of the district need to stay at the site in perpetuity, and exterior changes would come back to you.
Okay. Just kind of
Jeff, just to kind of collaborate with you here as well. When we seen the pulleys in there, like I grew up in a machine shop, by the way, so I was like welding and lathing when I was like 8, like Ninja Turtle kind of weapons when I was a kid. So like I love this stuff. And Pam and Antonio, they were like, we've got to preserve it. And I was like, we don't have to. Like I feel like it's excited to do it. Like when you walk in, there's like an amazing structure in there, like exposed structure, and the pulleys are huge, and it's amazing. And so like Stacey said, there's a very detailed historical preservation plan that Pam, Stacey, and Tony on the SQL consultants thoroughly reviewed. So it's almost once it's approved, it's almost like the rule book. You cannot deviate, and if they deviate, they have to come to a body like this and propose a deviation, which would be hard because I think we've got it right. But just to answer your question.
Something like signage. Again, I'm thinking in the future if the tenancy changes, would the signage again that would have to go through the Preservation Commission?
It would. We'd have to determine whether or not it's a full commission meeting or just with the minor alteration subcommittee. I suspect once the signage is determined, that future changes in signage would go to the minor alteration subcommittee.
Okay.
Right, and one thing I forgot to mention in regards to aesthetics is that we have dedicated some canvases to encourage public art, in which will be approved with the public art committee, as well as sculptures in the courtyard. And so with that, I really believe in in us celebrating art, historical art, as well as kind of storyboards of the historical kind of significance of this project. And I've worked with Stacey. I think I was like one of the first, maybe not the first developer, but when I first started out on my little projects, instead of paying the art fee, I would literally put cool sculptures in all my projects. And like, nobody ever does that. And I was like, why wouldn't they? It's amazing. I love contemporary art. So like, I love Jackson Pollock and Eve Klein, and et cetera, et cetera. So I forgot to mention that. And so so specifically, a great question. We're very sensitive to the signage because you don't want to design this beautiful kind of aesthetic and timeline and then have just like this super tacky sign, right, on it. And so we've designed our signage very minimally. If you can see, you probably didn't even notice it. It's very, like there's a lot of finesse to the signage. And so with that, we'll keep it very minimalistic. And so it's not just like a flashy neon sign or whatever, That's always my worry, is when the next tenant comes, and no one's watching, and then it's like this obnoxious sign that the tenant, the neighbor can call and there's nothing they can do.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from members of the commission? Okay. Does that conclude?
If I could interject here real quick, one more.
Of course.
I know that Commissioner Orhan had the two questions. The second question had to do with the outdoor dining and the tasting room. Those are also under the purview of the Planning Commission, both separately as conditional use permit land use entitlements. One is for the outdoor dining area because it exceeds a certain square footage. And the other is for the tasting room because it is classified under like a bar cocktail lounge. And there are a series of conditions that would be imposed via the Planning Commission's review of those items. The applicant did note that they were looking to close at 8 o'clock for the tasting room. We had initially, just as an aside, the initial thought of the operating hours for the outdoor dining area and the tasting room were going to be from 10 to 10. So just to kind of put a punctuation mark on that question, but it is something that is slightly outside of the purview of this commission.
Right. I think the thought was really, 10 on the indoor, but 8 on the outdoor. So sorry for misspeaking specifically.
Are there any additional members of the public that wish to speak in favor of the project?
Chair, we do have a member of the public signed on to the meeting. I'm not sure, to speak on which side, but we do have one member. If the commission's ready to take general public comment.
I also
Yes.
see that Commissioner Jackson has a question.
Yeah,
Oh.
I guess I'm having a little bit of trouble imagining this as a historic district, considering what is going to be done here. Maybe I'm just, because this is completely new and different from anything else that we've ever considered. I'm having a hard time imagining this as a historic district. I realize that a lot of the businesses that were discussed have historic value, but this is so different. Does anyone else have that same feeling, or am I just off base here?
Well, that is sort of my a little bit of perplexity about the interventions on the buildings that were completely altered. And so I've kind of understood that you renovate or adaptive reuse. And the way I understand it is they're trying to respect stylistically the period styles without creating, a fake historic building, sort of. I don't know if that's a good summation of the philosophy.
Right. I think that is good. I think also to add, David, and thank you, Jeff, is like we're paying homage to the old historical red car terminus, right? So the actual commercial like historic district is actually going to be called Catalina Station. And so if you think about the actual commercial buildings as one tentative map and then the residential as a second, right? What we're doing is we're working to preserve these commercial buildings because the whole site has been rezoned for R3A. Right? And so in the general plan, it was actually outzoned. So the buildings are actually legal non-conforming, right? And so that was the challenge. And so our purpose was to figure out a strategy in order to preserve these buildings. And so what we're doing is we're preserving the buildings, their facades, the architectural features in order to preserve it and pay homage to the old red car terminus and the different series of the historical significances. And so that is the strategy in which we're proposing. And we felt like we have been able to accomplish a lot over this period, the challenges that we're presenting. David.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I forgot to mention Catalina Station, by the way, earlier. Because the whole thing is called Catalina Village, but the actual historical kind of commercial space is called Catalina Station, in homage of the old red car terminus. And there'll be cool like signs for when you like bring your kids. You'll see like the old historical kind of, and like kind of the narratives and stuff like that. Also on top of that.
So are there any additional members of the public that would like to speak, whether in favor or in opposition?
Yes, I do believe we have one member of the public that is signed on. There's Alex Smith. Alex, did you want to say any, address the commission?
Hi, everybody. I'm just enjoying the event tonight, and I don't have any comments. Thank you very much, though. I do support it.
Thank you.
The question of the blue folder items, the letters from the public, is this the time to discuss that, or?
Yes, you can discuss those items.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, I noticed that they didn't come to the meeting, the people that wrote that. My initial impression of the objections about the parking is a little bit what Jason said. I noticed, I was thinking there's all the residences just across the street, and my guess is that the large percentage of the business is going to be walk-in traffic from the neighborhood. And I didn't see the parking pressure that they were envisioning. I think if there's parking pressure, it's kind of already there because of the pier. So I just wanted to kind of mention that. I don't know if any of the other commission members had thought about that, the parking.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly felt the same issue that you're kind of referring to, Jeff. Maybe we should direct this at Jason and his crew as to how they think that would play out once this was completed.
Right. I think it's an absolutely great question. That was kind of the solve. That was the calculus that we have been working on for 48 months. And I think the genesis and the kind of business plan that we kind of based on was, let's do a historical kind of district overlay or something to that effect in order to preserve these buildings. Incentive will be provided with a parking kind of alteration, similar to the project literally next to us in the east, right? And so what we did is we kind of interviewed, by the way, we've met with all the HOAs, like everybody. I mean, that's what we usually do, you know? And they're all like, oh, we would love a coffee shop. We would like, so it wasn't like what I thought. It was really like, they're like, we want a coffee shop. We want breakfast pantry. We want like a beer tasting room. And like, that was kind of like where it came from. And it was really mainly the people across the street that wanted to like come, and like the people behind us a little bit, because they're like behind the buildings, like a lot of residential behind it too. And so anytime I would be over there with like architects or whatever, people would be walking their dog and stop and say, hey, is there a coffee shop coming by? Is there this and that? And so that was kind of the genesis. And so I've been saying that word genesis too much. I've been listening to that. I listened to them, the band this morning. That's why. And so one other thing was we strategically were able to close off some curb cut, specifically to your question, David, to try to increase the parking. There's 17 parking spots actually in front of this project, which we can't technically say they're for our project, but like, you know, they're practically in front of our project for the kind of commercial. And so with, you know, Uber and like the ride sharing and electric, we're going to have electric bike kind of chargers. We're going to have the all of the kind of bike racks. And so with that being said, like we believe that 90% of the people that are visiting this are literally going to be locals that are across the street. Like I'm so close to the Riviera Village. I walk there with my stroller with my two kids, you know? So I'm imagining like the people that live there in that area, that's why the retail makes sense. Because that's who we're serving really. And it's not like I don't know, it's more experiential retail where it's, you know, it's breakfast, it's coffee, it's burgers, it's craft beer. So I feel like that's an amenity for folks to enjoy. And so I do agree that the pressures of that, I'm not too worried about because we are parking the residential 1-for-1, right? So the residential is parked. Right? It was really just the more parking that's required, unfortunately, what happens is the retail gets reduced. And so like literally, if you were to finish the equation, like the retail would get reduced all the way. And so that was the balance where we didn't want to do that. We wanted to preserve the buildings that had the most significance and protect as much as possible in order for it to function and still be the nucleus of the project. I used nucleus versus genesis. So I hope that was helpful, David. We really were very mindful of that. And it wasn't something that we just swept under the rug. Like we took the approach of entitling this project with the most intense uses for the resident or the retail components and the outdoor living so that we can get it entitled now. We could have took the easy route and said, oh, it's just going to be mercantile. It's just going to be a regular, you know, shop where people go and buy a sandwich and leave. But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to make sure that we're designing and building it and doing it with integrity. And I think that this is the highest and best use. And I think this is something that we're going to be really proud of. And I think that with the success of outdoor dining seen in the Riviera Village, I think it's going to be a place where people can be able to utilize this amenity, specifically for the people within the quarter-mile radius, but also for us, so we can also go there too.
No, I don't remember reading what is the approximate square footage of the various 30 units that you have?
The average is 1,200 square feet.
1,200.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on average. Yeah.
Commissioner Aziz?
Yes, I think this is in conjunction with Commissioner Matsuno's concern with the architectural difference and the overlay. I understand it's to build out or kind of frame the old historic difference with the district and districting it appropriately. Have you considered other architectural styles that might fit more appropriately with this particular district, maybe a style or in some cases, Spanish colonial of some sort, similar to maybe the Del Mar Station Transit Village in Pasadena. It's got a very kind of old, I guess you could say, Arizona style reminiscence that might fit more appropriately, has more of the stucco. It doesn't necessarily fit the beach theme of Redondo Beach, but it definitely kind of blends in with the architecture surrounding the other houses and other apartments in the area. Has that been a consideration at all?
Oh, most definitely. We've exhausted the exercise of the architectural styles, in which we've proposed many different reiterations, both with the architectural styles and site plans, in working in conjunction with the planning staff as well as the local community. And so there's been a concert of a reaction and embrace to this style that we're proposing. So it's not necessarily our opinion based, it's more the feedback that we've received. And it's been a long time coming. So it's something that we flushed out probably in the first 24 months, and it's been consistently kind of embraced by the community specifically. In the folks that are like literally living in the vicinity. And so that was something that was very loud and clear, because we did try contemporary, we've tried Spanish, we've tried a lot of different styles, and this is the one style that on average folks were embracing. And as you know, the community is very vocal, so they're not quiet. And so we've spoken with a lot of HOAs, everybody in this area. And so this is kind of what they're wanting, what they want, what they feel comfortable with. And the planning staff fine-tuned it and helped kind of craft the community's kind of vision in order to make it architecturally sound and making sure that it has a balance as well as fits within the urban context and has the rhythm of like the actual buildings themselves. So yes, we have considered alternative styles, but the community has spoke and we've been able to work with the planning staff in order to come to our conclusion.
Commissioner Galassi?
Hi, I had a question, a further question to the parking. What happens to, where do visitors park? So you have these additional units that you're building and you say you're parking one-to-one. Does that mean that you're providing one parking spot per unit? But what happens to other people who are coming to visit? And that's, excluding, and I'm talking not including people who are coming to, to go to the tasting room for these other businesses.
Right. So we've been working with the planning staff in order to comply with the restrictive state parking requirements. And so we've parked per the requirements for each unit specifically. So that is what we're parking to. So I don't mean one-to-one, like one, I meant the ratio of requirements. So it's not like one parking spot per unit. Sorry if I misspoke there. What I meant is that each unit is parked per the requirements that were put in front of us. So that was something that we solved for. So the residential is parked per the required code that was put in front of us. So that is something that is separate. The residential parking has been parked per the code. And the commercial project, the portion of it is something that we've been working in order to preserve as much of the building as possible and park as much of it as possible, as well as provide additional parking in front. And we've closed the curb cuts in order to provide 5 spots on site as well as 17 in front. So it's not 1-to-1 which means it's not one unit gets 1 spot. It's it's a little bit over 2 spots per unit. So on average, I think Redondo is 2 spots per unit, with additional requirements for different kind of density or unit counts. But we've worked with the planning staff.
On the question regarding the parking for the residential, it is something that is called out in the state density bonus law. They have a very specific parking ratio, which is based on the number of bedrooms per unit. And as city staff, we cannot impose a requirement that goes above and beyond that. So although the parking requirement under the municipal code would require more parking spaces and would require some guest parking spaces, we have to go with what the state requires, and that's based on a bedroom count. And that's they have a separate parking ratio for that versus the commercial.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Right. So Desiree, I think another way to put it is that we're not asking for concessions or variance for the residential parking. To put it in a different way.
Are there any further questions? Seeing and hearing none, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Also move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, it is so ordered. Does the commission have any questions or comments regarding the item?
So now we will be voting on the certificate of appropriateness and the variance. The actual plans is at a future date. That will be a separate item.
So what you'll be reviewing and determining tonight is if the historic district should be formed with those 4 buildings. If it's appropriate to remove the building at 116 North Catalina Avenue, if it's appropriate to make the modifications and adaptively reviews the buildings as identified for 112, 124, 126, and 132. And then you're also determining if the residential units are appropriate and compatible to in massing and scale per the Secretary of Interior standards, in conjunction with the formation of this district and having them adjacent to and behind the district.
Okay.
And then lastly, you'll be making a recommendation, sorry, you caught me, making a recommendation to the Planning Commission regarding the historic variance for reduced commercial parking.
Okay. The architectural, the adaptive reuse is based on these drawings that we've seen, or are these, so these are kind of the final designs?
These are the designs as they are right now. if approved by the Preservation Commission based on the historic elements of the project, and then if going next to the Planning Commission, they approve all the other entitlements necessary for the project, they will put together the construction drawings that will get further into the details of what they've proposed to you tonight.
Okay, so that's planning, not us.
Right.
Okay.
And Stacy, can I ask a question? I know you mentioned earlier that we have our attorney, I assume representing the city.
Yes, that's correct. Greg Kettles is present tonight.
And I did have a question about the definition, or if there is a elements related to the certificate of appropriateness. And I think I've heard a couple of the commissioners mention this. This is quite different than anything we've ever taken up. I'm having great difficulty with the concept, and I'm trying to think. I've always wanted to be somewhat consistent. And when it comes to a certificate of appropriateness for modifications, I'm having difficult time getting past the fact that one of the structures will be removed and 30 new residential units would be included. And when I think of a certificate of appropriateness for modifications, I cannot I cannot wrap my mind around the fact that these are modifications. Everybody here, I believe, probably drives up and down Catalina. Is very familiar with that location, and using the renderings that were shown during the presentation, I don't even know if I would recognize it ever again after a project like that. And so when I think of modifications, those renderings to me don't look like modifications. So I was wondering if there is a legal definition or elements that might help me make my decision.
Thank you, Chair Colwell. Greg Kettles, Best and Krieger Special Counsel to the city. I think it might help to put it to divide the issue before the commission into categories. So one issue you raised is about the alteration of 4 of the buildings in tearing down of a 5th. What's the standard that gets applied to that for the commission to determine whether that's appropriate or not? So on page 7 of the commission's packet, there is a list of the Secretary of Interior standards, sets out 10 guidelines that can be applied to a proposed modification of a historic structure. And so it's not like a yes-no test. These are 10 standards that can be applied in the exercise of the commission's judgment to decide whether the alterations are appropriate. In looking at these factors, for example, 1, a property shall be used for its historic purpose or be placed in a new use that requires minimal change to the defining characteristics of the building and its site and environment. And I invite the commission to consider what the historic expert Pam O'Connor shared about why this is a historic district. As she articulated, I'm not going to try to summarize or restate what she said because she put it so well, but the sense I got is that this is a walk through time and that it's the fronts of the buildings that evoke the city's history in the early 20th century. And so if that's what makes this a historic district, then what's happening on the back of those buildings is not quite as important as what's happening on the front. And as I understand the proposal, it's to restore and actually enhance the historic characteristics of the front of the buildings and maybe make some adjustments to the back and to the sides where those features of the buildings are not what make these a historic district as proposed. Commissioner Caldwell, you also asked about what to do about the fact that there's new residential proposed behind the historic structures and to the side. And that raises a separate issue under the city's law. And there's a city ordinance on this, which invites the commission to consider whether these new structures, these new buildings, their exteriors detract from the reason for the establishment of the historic district or are incompatible with it. I'm paraphrasing. And so the commission has heard testimony from the applicant and the consultants indicating that an architectural style was selected, California Coastal, to complement and not detract from the historic appearance of these buildings. So it's as I understood, it was sort of a neutral background. And so it's within the commission's discretion to say, okay, the way the residential has been designed, combination of setbacks and the exterior design, the architectural style, that's not detracting from the purpose of this historic district. So that was sort of a long-winded response to Commissioner Caldwell's question. I hope that's responsive. If it's not, please let me know and I'll try to make another stab at it.
No, thank you. Thank you for your response. Are there any additional questions or comments from members of the commission?
I have one, if I may. I think it would help tremendously, maybe as a summary, to understand what exact benefits the residential part is getting if the front 4 buildings are designated as a historic district.
Can you say that again, Orhan?
Sure. I'm sorry. What exact benefits, either financial or other, are the residential buildings as a whole are getting if the 4 buildings in front of them are being designated as a historic district?
I'll take a stab at that. It's the exact opposite.
No, if I may, just point of procedure. You've closed the public hearing and the applicant is considered a member of the public for asking any questions. You could move to reopen the public hearing if you wanted to, get answers from the applicant on any of your questions. I just want to make sure that we're following the process appropriately. So
would it be possible to hear our counsel first and then maybe the staff before we go to the applicant?
Well, Commissioner Taylor, I was hoping maybe that I could answer your question.
Please.
The project, again, it's multiple stages. They are coming before you first, the Preservation Commission, before we have the meeting on Thursday in front of the Planning Commission. And as part of the land use entitlements that the Planning Commission is entertaining is the density bonus. And part of the density bonus, that land use entitlement is tied in with a recommendation on a parking variance. And the parking variance is specifically tied to the 3 buildings that are going to be adaptively reused. And that's where the benefit comes from, because the historic variance or the variance for a historic property, those findings are much easier to make. Those findings are focused internally on the use of the building, the adaptive reuse of those buildings and making it viable to reuse those buildings. That's the main benefit. Because otherwise, to approve a variance, it's a very high standard where you have to find that there's something unique about the property, either the size, the shape, the topography, that makes it impossible for them to adhere to the development standards. But in this case, again, it's the bar is a little bit lower to get past because it is a historic structure. And we're using the variance procedure to enable the adaptive reuse of those buildings. And that's the benefit. I'm hoping that responds to the question.
It sure did. So then, if I understand you correctly, the applicant is mainly seeking the historic district designation for a parking related issue.
That's correct. To be able to reuse those buildings.
Okay.
And to get the parking variance, a recommendation from the commission on the parking variance.
And if I may ask again, either to our council or to you, are there any tax-related benefits or any other financial benefits for the residential part, either for the developer or even for the tenants in the future, or if there may be a new buyer in the future, that because they are basically being built right behind the historic district?
Yes, again, Commissioner Tano, great question. As part of the density bonus application, when they do request a mixed use zoning provision, they have to demonstrate that mixed use, so the commercial portion of the project, will somehow offset the costs of the residential buildings. And it does. They provided that information to us, so we have reviewed that. There was one other point I was going to make, but that's one of the main provisions there.
If I may add,
yes,
the tax benefit does not apply to residential units. It would only apply for structures within the historic district. And then getting a little bit into what Senior Planner Gardea said, the density bonus allows for the mixed use, so the commercial can stay. If we designate the historic district that's legal non-conforming, right? It was originally commercially zoned, later zoned residential. We get to keep those commercial uses, not only maintain these interesting structures, but provide residents serving commercial uses for the new residents as well as the whole neighborhood.
Right. Thank you for that, Stacey. That was my point that I was going to make, is that the tax benefit that comes afterwards, should the historic district be formed, if these be designated as contributors to the district, for those buildings that would be adaptively reused, and there's 3 buildings here towards the front, and also a portion of the Masonic Hall that's being adaptively reused. So those could all potentially receive tax benefits. With the land use entitlement, they are looking to do airspace subdivision, and many other times they do that in order to finance and separate some of those the properties or the buildings that benefit from those tax ratios to be separate from the remainder of the project.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to add one other point, if I may. As the applicant had noted, this project has been in process for several years. In the very, very early genesis of the project, and I think this was before Jason was involved, there was a team of developers who were looking to demolish these buildings. And our community development director actually spoke up and said that we thought as staff that this might be a part of the original downtown. So that's when the historic resource evaluation was put together. And when Big Beach City Capital got involved, we all collaborated to see what could be built while maintaining these structures along the block face.
I think this might be the same as the question that Chair Caldwell mentioned. So I understand all the things that we're asked to review, but the construction of the 30 new units adjacent to, behind the potential historic resources, we've never been asked to review and approve adjacent structures to historic landmarks. So why is this different?
So you have reviewed and approved adjacent structures, but on a much smaller scale, such as a new garage, right? For a local landmark that doesn't have a 2-car garage. We did that for 124 South Guadalupe. So there have been new structures adjacent to landmarks, but this is the largest scale project that you will see with new residential units, several new residential units. So it's a question of whether or not you believe the design of those units, the height, the massing, the architectural style, if those are compatible with and appropriate adjacent to this potential historic district.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then I wanted to call it also to, I think there was 2 projects very close to one another. On Guadalupe, I think, or Francisco, where there was a downsloping lot, a house in the front, and then there was a couple of units that were built behind. So that came before the commission at one point.
Right.
So requesting a variance recommendation for the driveway, because it was a really narrow driveway. So I recall that one specifically, but again, much smaller projects, nothing of this size.
Yeah.
I also wanted to point out is that you are considering the formation of the district, and so all of this would be one big district. And then as our council, Greg Kettles mentioned, there is a municipal code requirement, and on agenda, on the page 45 of the agenda, it does talk about that. And it's, when you look at this, the construction, it does have a very specific criteria that you have to consider. And it states that in the case of construction of a new building structure improvement on a site where a landmark is located on property within a historic district, that the exterior of such improvements will not adversely affect and will be compatible with the external appearance of existing designated improvements, buildings and structures on such a site or within such a district. So that's the key criteria that you have to take into consideration. And so, like I said, Commissioner Tanner will very astutely recognize that, and so that is a very good question that has been, something that has come up periodically, and it is absolutely within your purview.
Are there any final questions? Comments? Do we have a motion?
Do we have to make motions for each request separately?
We should make a motion detailing which elements of the project you're approving. And you have the different resolutions, the draft resolutions that were prepared. And so you should make a determination for each certificate of appropriateness, including the removal and the modifications and the new residential units, and then ultimately make a recommendation regarding the parking.
I guess I'll make a motion.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Matsuno. I just wanted to ask Stacy if how the motion on the recommendation should be, if that should just be admitted action, or should that be incorporated into the resolutions, or do we have an idea of how that motion for the recommendation, how that should be done?
You mean what the recommendation language should be?
Or where the recommendation, if that needs to be included into any of the resolutions? Or...
Oh, yes, it is incorporated in 3 of the resolutions. So there is a note that supports, if that is how the commission feels, there is language within the certificate of appropriateness resolutions for 124, 126, and 132. And it's just a note stating that the Preservation Commission recommends approval for the parking variance for reduced parking.
Oh, yes.
That's folded into those 3 resolutions if the commission so chooses.
It's called out under section 5. Thank you, Stacey.
Correct. That's right. It's section 5 of those 3 resolutions.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Can we also not make a motion tonight on this, Antonio?
You do have the opportunity to provide feedback to the applicant for elements that you think may or may not be appropriate. You could ask that the project be altered and brought back to you. It could be continued if there are specific elements that you feel are not appropriate, but we need to provide direction.
Yeah, I'm not so certain that it's that that I know for certain that I want there to be changes or otherwise, but you just discussed how we have looked at plans that are in the same spirit as this one, but in a much smaller scale. So when we look at this, there is the dilemma of being certain that when we make a decision on this, that it's not impacted either positively or negatively by the fact that it is such a big project. And I know it's a bit overwhelming to me, given all the various facts or issues or questions that people have brought up tonight. But I'm just asking, you know, it's kind of like, well, you need more time or not. I know that 48 months is a long time. So, but I don't know, how does everyone feel about being able to make a decision tonight?
I feel like I can. I'm going to address one, again, Chair Caldwell's comment about this idea that he might not even recognize that particular block of Catalina after this project. I have to go back to there was a residence on Catalina, or on one of the avenues. And I think I was the only no vote for the addition of the second story in the back. And I said, because for me, the avenues down there are all those little one-story Spanish bungalows. And I felt that the addition of the second story was going to begin a snowball that's going to completely change the whole look of the avenues. At that time, I think Chair Caldwell said that, and again, this is the dilemma that we're faced all the time on this commission is, do we approve a change, you know, something that's going to change the look in order to save the building? And I think, again, we're sort of faced with that. I believe Jason basically said that, you know, for example, the parking variance was necessary to save the buildings. Otherwise, to have the necessary parking, it would have become impossible. So I feel like we're trying to save those 4 buildings, and there's the compromises that we have to make. So it's not going to be exactly the same. It's not going to look like it is now, but at least we know that we've done our job to preserve those structures. That's my feeling.
Are there any further comments? And I don't believe I've heard any member of the commission make a motion.
I'm not sure if I'm going to word the motion correctly, but I would move to approve the request for the historic district formation. That's the first item, I guess.
And Is that clear to staff as far as the first step?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
I will second, as that is clear.
We'll do a roll call vote. Jackson?
And real quick, before we do that, Stacy, would you mind restating the motion as you heard it?
That Vice Chair Matsuno moves to approve the designation of the historic district. Is that what you stated? Yes.
Okay.
Jackson?
I would vote yes.
Matsuno?
Yes.
Galassi?
Yes.
Hayner?
Yes.
Aziz?
Yes.
Chair Caldwell?
No.
Now, I would recommend that if you are exploring the certificate of appropriateness applications, either somebody make a motion or the group discuss any elements of the appropriateness applications that require further discussion.
That one, I feel like the drawings we saw, I kind of get the general idea, but it seems like because they sort of get fixed by what we approve, that we would need sort of the architectural, a little bit more detailed rendering of that. I don't know if the others feel that way.
I agree.
Yeah, so because that was my understanding that sort of if we approve, it's sort of what's in those drawings, which seems, the drawings seem sort of presentation drawings rather than, actual architectural drawings.
Stacy, do you have a comment or thoughts? Or Antonio?
So the plans do reflect the site plan, the floor plans, and the elevation drawings, which are the basic architectural package. It's a question of what further elements you would like to see within that package. There are, of course, renderings and perspectives, but they do have some basic floor plans and elevations.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of the other projects that we've approved. Usually they're detailing the window treatments and, the siding and all that.
Right.
Matsuno, if I could just interject here real quick. You do have a number of certificates of appropriateness, and these are the structural alterations of these buildings that are all now contributors to the historic district, including certificate of appropriateness for removal of the building at 116 North Catalina. And so you can take each individual certificate of appropriateness and make decisions on that. As Stacy was noting, you can discuss any one in particular if you think that there needs to be conditions of approval or any follow-up to those consideration of those certificates of appropriateness. But you do have the individual buildings that you're looking at, as well as the overall construction of the new residential units, in particular the ones that are attached to the Masonic Hall. So those are, you want to take, if you want to take a look at the individual buildings, you can take each certificate of appropriateness individually. We have outlined what those changes would be to some of the buildings, in particular the building at like 124 North Catalina, where there would be some windows added to the side of the building, and a new bulkhead, stone bulkhead, stacked stone bulkhead at the bottom. We don't have the details of necessarily what the finished materials would be. We could always bring those back to like minor alterations subcommittee, or if you want to, we can bring it back to the full commission. But what you're looking at is big picture, kind of a overall consideration of whether these changes are appropriate or not, and moving forward with this, allowing the structural alterations to the buildings, and with that, the adaptive reuse and the recommendation for the parking variance.
Okay.
I hope that's helpful.
Each of the resolutions for the buildings to be saved but modified, I do have a condition of approval that states that the project shall comply with the historic preservation plan prepared by Kaplan Chen Kaplan, dated November 20th, 2020. I tried to tie back in to the work that Kaplan Chen Kaplan did. And then, as Pam noted earlier, there would be a historic architect as part of the construction drawings and overseeing the construction phasing. They didn't provide that level of detail in this package because we weren't sure if the commission would be comfortable with these alterations. Each building has its own set of alterations. But we could certainly bring details back to you if that is the direction of the group.
The other thing that I wanted to note is like the building at 132 North Cantina, blacksmith shop, the exterior has been completely altered and is not original and would be absolutely reclad new. But that's not what makes the building historic. It's what was taking place inside the building. So we feel comfortable with those types of alterations because none of it is original anyways. So we have looked at these pretty carefully through Stacy's presentation. We kind of outlined what those character defining features are and how they would be maintained. And so we were hoping that you could take a look at the kind of broader or bigger picture and give us direction on moving forward. And perhaps, like I said, maybe bringing some of the details back on anything in particular that you want to look at.
Okay, if so, for myself, I feel comfortable in moving to approve. Again, the motion can be to approve with the stipulation or that detailed drawings would be provided to the commission when available. So it's sort of a conditional approval. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, if I may, I think that you would, you could say approve the resolution with the added condition that the architectural designs will come back to the Preservation Commission. Prior to looking to Stacy and Antonio for so you have a time frame of when it'll come back to you.
Prior to plan check submittal.
There we go.
Maybe prior to the commencement of any construction on the site.
Well, and that would be before with the plan check. That's where they're evaluating the construction drawing. So you'd want to have that fleshed out then. So I think that the plan check approval would work, which would be prior to any construction.
Yeah, I think that I hesitate a little bit because I know that there's a lot of pre-demolition work that needs to happen. And so there needs to be some demolition permits that are issued so that they can get in there and test for asbestos, for example, things like that. So I think that we do want to make it prior to permit issuance for construction.
That sounds great.
Prior to, excuse me?
Prior to plan check schedule for the construction of the new buildings, alterations of the new buildings, or the buildings, restoration of the buildings, I should say. Rehab and restoration per the Secretary of Interior standards.
So I don't know if this is going to sound correct. I move to approve the certificate of appropriateness for modifications to existing potential historic resources on the condition that the Preservation Commission review detailed plans prior to the plan check.
Is that clear to staff?
No,
Yes.
I thought we changed the plan check to issuance of construction permits.
It can be either one because plan check comes well before permit issuance.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff,
Yes.
are you assuming that the commission not only review it, but we would need to approve those new drawings or updated drawings?
Yes.
Speak up a little bit, please.
I was asking Jeff, are we assuming that those new drawings, when they come back to us, that the commission not only review them, but we would be approving them?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's like I said, I'm trying to move ahead with the approval because I kind of see what the developers are doing, and I kind of trust the direction they're moving in, and also staff. But just in case they decide to, make a building covered with mirrors, we should be able to say no to that. So yeah, that's the wording I wanted to get into the motion. So does that motion, does that stand, or should I repeat it?
I just want to clarify with you,
Okay.
Vice Chair, are we covering the certificate of appropriateness for 112, 124, 126, and 132? All the structures to be saved but modified?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Great.
Is there a second?
I second.
Second, we'll give it to Warren.
Do we have a second?
Yes, I second it, Chair.
Yep. If we can go to roll call?
Jackson,
Yes.
Galassi,
Yes?
Matsuno,
Yes.
Tainer,
Yes.
Aziz,
Yes.
and Chair Caldwell.
No.
Okay.
So then the certificate of appropriateness for the removal of the building at 116 North Catalina Avenue would be next, either for discussion or for motion.
Are there any comments or a motion?
I'll move that we approve the certificate of appropriateness for the removal of a structure within the potential historic district 116 North Catalina.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the Chair.
Thank you very much. Roll call?
Jackson,
Yes.
Galassi,
Yes?
Matsuno,
Yes.
Tainer,
Yes.
Aziz,
Abstain.
and Chair Caldwell.
No. And I believe we still have one outstanding item.
We have the certificate of appropriateness in relationship to the new residential units, right? Like that, or no,
Would that mean we have two?
that wasn't included as part of the 124, right? Vice Chair, we didn't include that as part of your original motion
No, it was only for the
for the historic district
modifications
buildings.
existing.
Okay. So then it's the certificate of appropriateness for the new residential units adjacent to the historic district.
With adjacent, you are talking about the one next to the Masonic Hall or the entire new
All of-
residential development?
It would be all 30 units, the 22 behind the district, as well as the 8 within and adjacent to the Masonic Hall.
Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the construction of the 30 new and residential units adjacent to and behind the potential historic resources.
With the condition or no? With the condition that we see the plans?
Yeah, I guess we can add that also.
There a second?
I'll second it.
We'll do a roll call. Jackson,
I'm going to abstain on this.
Velasi,
I too will abstain.
Matsuno,
Yes.
Tainer,
Yes.
Aziz,
I'll vote yes on this one.
and Chair Caldwell.
No.
Okay.
I did have a question about this, and this might be one for planning, if I may. Does this fall within the RENA required housing element that has been proposed? Okay.
It does, yes.
Thank you for that.
Lena, I want to check in with you. Do we have enough votes on that last motion?
So I was about to say, so we only have 3 yeses, which is not enough to pass the motion.
Okay. And that's for the residential units.
Dana, can you recall what the vote was again? It was 3 yeses.
Well, it was two abstentions, and then 3 yeses and a no.
So that's not a majority?
That's not a majority.
Majority would be 4 yeses.
Okay. I think, I'd like to maybe ask Greg Kettles if he could, maybe he can chime in and answer this question. I'm wondering if abstentions, should the commissioners state why they're abstaining from the vote, or should they just vote no? Because typically I think with abstentions, it's for conflicts of interest. Would you mind responding to that? I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, that's quite all right. I mean, how abstentions get counted for purposes of determining whether a motion carries or not is a matter of city law. So this is a matter of Redondo Beach policy. And so I defer to staff as far as counting it. The other question embedded in what you just posed, Antonio, is whether commissioners are allowed to abstain when they don't have a conflict of interest. The answer is yes. A commissioner can abstain in any circumstance as far as state law is concerned. Again, unless there's something specific in Redondo Beach policy that prevents that, I think an abstention is fine.
I would be happy to explain why I am abstaining.
Thank you, Greg.
My biggest concern is that I'm uncertain as to the fact that this is such a big project, and that I'm not certain that I have all the answers or questions that I may or may not come up with. I mean, this is a big project. I may very well vote yes on it, but as of right now, I guess there are other questions I have about this. And if by voting yes on this, I am saying, yes, let's go forward without any type of follow-up, I'm not totally comfortable with it.
Are there any additional comments regarding the vote?
Can I ask you, David, what your questions are?
I guess the questions relate to, 30 additional units in that location is a lot of units. We've already discussed the fact that the parking is going to be a challenge in and of itself, but there are other issues that come to mind, such as what kind of housing is this going to be? How if this is a historic area, are we going to be putting multi-million-dollar houses in a historic area? How expensive houses in a historic area is appropriate? I'm not certain of that. Maybe it's fine, and maybe somebody could have a response to that. But we have not had an issue like this come before us before. And so I would like to hear from some of the other commissioners how they feel about those issues. If they don't seem to have a similar problem or issue with it, perhaps I could move forward with it. But right now, I'm feeling this is fairly complex, and that obviously the decision to create a historic district and what would the other motion that we decided with respect to it were pretty easy to say yes to, but I put it back to the other commissioners. How do you feel about the complexity concern putting 30 additional units in that location, given that it is going to be considered a historic area?
Well, I think I kind of said what I think is that if we don't approve this, I don't know the recourse. I believe they can go to city council. Is that correct? But my feeling is if it gets blocked, there's a good chance that you'll still have 30 residential structures built there, but you will not have the historic structures. The next developer is going to come along and just demolish them. And then you'll just have the new residential structures.
Well, what from Jason said is, as of now, Jason, you indicated that you do not own the property.
We have it under contract.
Commissioner Jackson.
You can't respond.
Yeah,
You can't respond.
The public hearing is still closed.
Yeah. If I may, just so you're aware, under the density bonus law, under what the zoning is for this property, it can actually be more than 30 units through the density bonus law. Correct me if I'm wrong, Antonio, but it could be up to like 30, 33, 35.
33.
Yeah, 33 units. So I just wanted to, just make that clear, and then it would not have any of the that neighborhood business used there.
And I also believe Stacy mentioned in her presentation that developers had stepped forward who had no interest in saving those buildings, and they were ready to go to build. So I see what we're doing as saving those structures.
May I briefly explain why I voted yes? First of all, I am in general very much for any new residential development in the city of Redondo Beach. And especially if it's such a small and for my own criteria, a tasteful project like that. And especially if it involves at least 4, hopefully more low to mid income family units, besides the scope of the Preservation Commission, I am in favor of such projects. That's the number one thing. Number two, I am obviously, just like you, Commissioner Jackson, and our chair, concerned about how the final look is going to be, whether we are going to be recognized that place or not. That's the reason why I suggested, with the condition of seeing the final plans, seeing the color scheme, seeing how this actually it's going to look and feel like. Again, this is a maybe personal preference. I'm not a huge fan of coastal California, whatever that is, but I heard the argument about that it will provide a backdrop. Maybe there are some, maybe once we see the final plans, it will look good to us. Maybe it won't. But stopping a project at this stage didn't make sense to me. And it seemed to me, with the condition of seeing the final plans, and then basically the materials, as you're absolutely right. I mean, when we, for example, discuss in this commission very small projects of, 200 square foot, we got into so much detail. And here we are talking about a gigantic landmark project, and we don't have a thing. So my idea was to go ahead with it, but make sure that we retain the power of either canceling or giving some more detailed advice to the developers as to how this new project will look like. Thank you.
If I could just chime in again, I'm happy to hear the commissioners debating this project from a variety of perspectives and using a variety of criteria. I want to remind the commission, however, that the specific issue before you right now is a certificate of appropriateness with respect to the housing. And the test on this one is very specific. The question is whether the exterior of the residential component of the project will not adversely affect and will be compatible with the external appearance of the existing designated improvements in the would-be historic district. So again, the question is whether the exterior of the residential will adversely affect and will be compatible with the historic district. And so to the extent there is a debate about is, for example, California coastal, is that compatible or not? That is right within the commission's discretion. That's within your purview to talk about that. When the commission is starting to get away from that and talk about the number of units or parking, I'm a little bit concerned that's going outside the commission's purview. So I encourage the commission to stay focused on this test of the exterior of the residential versus the external appearance of the historic.
And can I ask you a question, Mr. Kettles? Something that you said resonated with me the first time you said it, and then you just repeated it, which is whether the exterior would be compatible with the historic buildings. And I know, and when Commissioner Matsuno spoke of past incidents, I knew exactly which one he was referring to. I can picture it in my head. And that's really what it comes down to. When you talked about the number of units, to me, that's the exterior. You could have one unit if it was that big and that massive, being the backdrop of that of those historic buildings, which I think mean a lot to a lot of people in Redondo Beach. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been to Catalina Coffee and been outside on that patio, and you look at it and you think about that backdrop, whether it's California coastal or whatnot. To me, it could be 30 units or one unit. It is massive. And that's the part. This isn't approving a second level that you can barely see from the street. This isn't approving an additional, father-in-law or mother-in-law unit in the back, or even a garage in the back. This is building a garage that you wouldn't even recognize what's in front of it. And so that's how I viewed it. And I kind of questioned one of my earlier votes as far as the historic district formation. But I think that for me, it was the totality of the project. And I'm not really at this point supportive of it. And that's the reason for my no votes. So I think at this point, the last one did not pass. However, there were 2 abstentions.
Yeah, Chair, if I may, this is Director Forbes. Per the city's procedures, each member of a board or commission shall vote unless he or she states the reasons for abstention for the record. So we do have in our municipal code a requirement for stating your reasons for abstentions, which I believe that Commissioner Jackson did.
Correct. So would our other abstention wish to clarify why? Or of course, change their vote?
That was me. And David really said a lot of what I was thinking as well. In addition, part of it is, I go back to the hall that's going to be removed. I guess I don't feel I have enough information as to that. And that particular hall really represents everything that went on in that building and has significant historical value. So for those reasons, I felt it better to abstain than to vote no because of the level of uncertainty that I have.
In a previous vote that we had, we didn't have the exact same set of circumstances. I can't remember exactly what they were, but we put it back on to the developer and basically asked them to, someone else mentioned I think it was Mr. Tanner. He indicated that if we saw what it would look like, then we would be in a better position to approve it. So perhaps, Jason, what you could do is to provide some sort of drawing or illustration of what this would look like, beyond what you've already provided. And if it looks like it does satisfy those, objections, I think that I would be in a better position to, give you a yes vote to it. I mean, how do you feel about that?
He can't.
Okay, sorry about that.
That doesn't, you could, one of the possibilities, if you as a commission chose to, you could move to reopen the public hearing. You could move to continue the public hearing or you could have that conversation with Mr. Mueller, the developer, and then decide if you want to continue the hearing so that you can continue the discussion on the remaining items.
I think I'd like to move to reopen the public hearing because we spent quite a bit of time on this. I think we owe it to him for all the work that he's done, his staff, his people have done. I don't want to hold something up just to hold it up, but I do want to feel satisfied that we're doing our job. I understand Cliff's point of view, and Jeff's point of view on this, because we've been through this issue many, many times before about saving as many properties as we possibly can. And I feel exactly the same, but I would like to kind of have that comfort feeling that this is going to fit in with a historic district that we're going to approve.
And may I just, Greg, would that be appropriate for them? I know that we've done that before. I'm just realizing that they voted on some of the resolutions. Would it be reopening the public hearing for the consideration of the certificate of appropriateness for the residential units?
That's what I'm hearing. I think that's just fine.
Can I make one comment before? I'm looking at, I think it's page 142, because I understand what Commissioner Caldwell is saying about the massing of the buildings behind the historic structures. And one of the things that's happening in the drawings there on page 142 is the straight perspective drawing, the elevation drawing, excuse me. It does look like a massive white wall behind the historic structures, but when you actually see the street view, because that played into the avenues structure also, because the argument was that the street view. So it's funny because I'm arguing the opposite of what I argued last time.
Yes, you are.
The street view, sort of this perspective drawing, you're down and you're kind of looking up at the buildings, and they're not quite as obtrusive as they are in the elevation, where it looks like a big white wall behind them. And again, I'm going to just mention, I think, if I recall right, the structures, the historic structures are all C rated, so they don't have to come to us to get permission for demolition in the future if a different developer decides to take if we can't get this through and then a different developer steps up, we don't have any way of saving those structures.
That's not exactly true.
Oh, sorry.
We now have a historic resource evaluation.
Oh, that's coming up. Yeah.
Structures. So the C ratings for the structures are irrelevant now. Everything is about the historic resource evaluation prepared by Chen Kaplan. So no, somebody can't come in tomorrow and demo the historic district because significance has been presented and documented within this report.
And I just want to remind you as well, they took a vote to actually designate the district. So there's that too.
The vote did take place.
Yes, tonight.
Okay.
Yes.
So I heard a motion to open the public hearing. I'll go ahead and make a second on that and ask if there are any objections. Hearing none, Mr. Mueller, I don't know if you recall the question.
Yeah, I do absolutely.
Okay.
So to Jackson, I felt through kind of living here and looking at the landscape from an urban planning and investment standpoint, that there's a lot of for sale product, right? And the for rent product is very expensive because there's a scarcity of the supply. So we need to provide for rent housing. And so I've worked really diligently to provide this product, the for rent housing product. So it's not $2 million townhomes or $3 million townhomes or whatever. And I specifically did that because of the need for market rate housing. So thank you, David, for that question. I think it's a very important question for me to answer. Number two is that I learned this early on. I went to USC, Public School of Public Privacy, and studied urban planning. And a lot of the time developers, they'll do a monolithic kind of structure right on the setback, the front yard setback, right? But if you have the opportunity to provide a step back where your building is actually behind the first structures and you can see the sky at a 45-degree angle, that is true urban planning there. And so we specifically designed this project, to Jeff's point, if you're walking on that sidewalk, you will see blue sky. You will not see a building up there. Even though the buildings across the street, mind you, are 55 feet tall, right? Regardless of that, our project was designed specifically for that. And so, so one, it's a for rent project, right? So we're not providing these like $1 million for sale projects that I think would or would not be conducive, but I'm sensitive to for rent housing. So that's why I wanted to provide that. And I'll continue to invest in Redondo Beach and continue to provide for rent housing. I think it's in high demand because there's a scarcity of supply. Everybody's building townhomes and condos and selling them, which, you know, that's their prerogative. But two is that, Mr. Jackson, I can assure you that with mine and Kate Hirsch's attention to detail and our celebration of architecture and contemporary design and art and our love for the city, that we're going to do our very best to work with the Planning Commission and with all of the architectural review when we're in our plan check, so that when we come back and present you guys our construction drawings, I know that you guys will be pleasantly pleased, at least of how hard we work. We might not get it exactly right, but you will realize how hard we work on every inch of this. And please correct me, Stacy or Antonio, but we have reviewed every square foot of every facade, every building, and we work diligently. And Pam, she was not a yes lady. She beat me up a lot, and she like told me what I have to do. And so we worked our tails off to get to this point. Though we're in the entitlement phase, like Antonio had mentioned. This is like the first step. Then we have Planning Commission. Then we have our construction documentation. Then we have all our department reviews, you know, before we go to construction. And then on top of that, we're also going to have a third-party construction historical architect to monitor the construction as well. On top of that, so it's a road less traveled because all developers don't want to do this, right? And one thing to note to your question, Jeff, is that when we first got to this project, the reports were stating the opposite of what they're stating now, right? We invested time, money, effort, and risk into highlighting the historical significance of this project. Like we were working in concert to embrace the historical, you know, significance of this. So it wasn't like a yes, 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 oh, this is great, let's do that. It was like a no, 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 how can we get, you know, and like, you know, what am I trying to look for? How can we get past that challenge? And like, I want to say that we're able to celebrate the accomplishments of where we're at now. And this is the best possible solution that we've worked on for 48 months regarding the high land prices, the risk on the retail, and the historical preservation component of it, working with the city's guidance. And so this is kind of the best possible solution that we've worked on with the best consultants for the last 48 months. And so I hope that was a helpful answer to you, Mr. Jackson, Jeff, and the crew, I guess, or the commission, sorry.
Thank you, Jason.
Are there any follow-up questions from the commission for Mr. Mahler? Seeing and hearing none, would somebody like to make a motion to close the public hearing?
It depends. You guys could make that motion. Just know that if you do decide that you want to continue this after you close it and have more discussion, that you'll want to reopen it to continue it. Just want to give you the heads up.
I'll second the motion. I'll make the motion to close the public hearing.
Okay.
Before we close the public hearing, I see a member of the public that has a hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey,
Oh,
that's
Mr.
me.
Smith.
Hi, this is Alex Smith. I do have a question. I thought of this earlier. I think David was speaking. You guys are all familiar with the Mills Act. To what degree, probably not even close to the magnitude, on these kind of issues, but to what degree are you supposed to judge the appropriateness of the project based on what people will see from the sidewalk? Not necessarily what's happening inside the walls or the function, but rather the form that the public can observe from the sidewalk.
I'll take a stab at that. And I know that the Preservation Commission, when we approve homes as landmarks, it's what's visible from the private right of way. So we're not making any judgment as to the floor plans of the residences. And then to my colleagues on the commission, I'd go back again and look at the presentation in the agenda packet. Like I was looking at, what am I looking at? Page 265. The residences, they're two-story residences, but from the street view, you're just seeing sort of a sliver of them above the buildings.
So the bottom line, Alex, is, and I'm just going to rephrase this because it's pretty simple. It's what you can see from the street level that impresses you that this is a building or a district that is historic from the eye, because we really don't have anything to do with what goes inside the house. Did that answer your question, Alex?
Yes, that did answer my question. Thank you.
So I believe I have a motion to close the public hearing.
Yes.
Second.
Does anybody oppose closing the public hearing? Seeing and hearing none, the public hearing is closed. We did have a vote on that item. We did go through the explanation of the two abstentions. I did want to check with staff to make sure that that would suffice, and then also check with our two commissioners to see if anybody would like to change their vote now that we've received additional information under the public hearing.
I'm going to go ahead and change my vote to yes. I appreciated Jason's comments. I'm going to hold you to it, Jason. And you definitely believe in what you're talking about, at least from what I can tell. So I wish you the best of luck in your efforts.
And to check with staff, is that okay to record his vote as a yes?
Yes, so in your, I've pulled up a copy of the the Preservation Commission bylaws. And so it does say that a member is allowed to change their vote as long as the chairperson has not moved on to another item.
So we are good. I will check with Commissioner Galassi as well. I don't know if you have reconsidered your vote, but if you have and would like to record it now before we move on, I think it would be best.
I will change my vote as well to a yes.
Thank you very much. And that'll be reflected.
There's one more motion. I'll go ahead and do it.
Correct.
I move that we approve historic variance for reduced commercial parking for the potentially historic properties located within a low-density multi-family residential zone at 100 through 132 North Catalina Avenue.
Thank you very much for the motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
If we could go to roll call.
Yes, Jackson,
Yes.
Galassi. Sorry, was that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Matsuno,
Yes.
Tanner,
Yes.
Aziz,
Yes.
Chair Caldwell.
No.
You guys are awesome.
Congratulations, Mr. Mueller.
Thank you very much. I promise to work as hard as I possibly can to get this done and make something proud, make us proud of this project.
I'm looking forward to my first burger and beer there.
You got it, guys.
Can I ask a technical question?
Absolutely.
Now that our resolution, some of our resolutions have some conditions in it, how are we going to incorporate that into our future meetings? Is the staff going to advise us when those plans are ready?
Yes, that approval with those additional conditions requires us to bring it back to you before we would allow something to come in as a plan check application. So that will be our requirement. And as soon as we see that they are ready to come back to you, they wouldn't be able to, it's similar as they wouldn't be able to do some of the other steps, they wouldn't be able to go to the plan check without our approval. We don't have the ability to waive that or ignore that. That's our responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, well, with that, we'll move on to item K, which is items continued from previous agendas. And I don't know if we have any. Stacy or Antonio, I don't know if you have anything to add.
We don't have any continued items. Because this is a special meeting, we didn't have any other projects lined up. There was a referral to staff regarding the Mills Act and the assessor's office. Senior planner Antonio Gardea has been working with the assessor's office to have a representative at a future meeting, potentially in May, to present to the commission.
Thank you. Item L, items for discussion prior to action. Nothing.
There are no further items.
Items from staff. No.
If I may, so hopefully commissioners will be able to attend the scheduled May meeting. We will have an item for the city manager to discuss the budget. And I know in the past that there's been an interest in updating the survey. And so this will be your opportunity that you can share that with the city manager. So hopefully you'll be able to attend and participate in that item.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that meeting will be in person. It'll
Correct.
be a return to the.
Correct. It'll be back in the council chambers.
Okay.
And we'll make sure to let you know. We'll probably invite you to come a little bit early just so we can show you where, it's been completely remodeled in council chambers.
Oh.
You're familiar with your spots, your computers. You will have computers in front of you.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay.
Do I need to let you know now that I have a conflict that evening, unfortunately?
What you can do is please just email us, but do email cityclerk@redondo.org to request an excused absence from them.
What is the exact date? May what?
Wednesday, May 4th. Is that what you're talking about for the next regularly scheduled meeting?
Yes, my daughter gave birth to a little girl, so we're going to go back to New York in May. But
Congratulations.
Thank you. So be a bit later on in May, so I can make the meeting.
Great.
Okay.
Can I ask, is there any chance that one can join the meeting via Zoom, even if it's a physical meeting, just in case that I need to be out of town?
At this point, the city council hasn't established those rules for the commissions. I think they're going to be looking to do that in the future, but at this point, I think that it's going to have to be in person.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Okay, moving on to item N, commission items and referrals to staff. We did have one earlier in the meeting related to the historic library. So if we can bring that back at a later date.
I have that noted.
There's one thing I forgot to mention about that, if I may add it. I have taken several tours of the building inside, and I know that the city has scheduled another walkthrough. I don't know the exact date, but if Stacy or Antonio can inform us, it would be maybe fun for you to take a look to the inside of the building as well. It's literally stunning. It's an amazing building.
It is. I've attended a Redondo Beach Education Foundation event there a few years back, and it's beautiful. So if anybody would like to do that tour, perhaps Stacy or Antonio can let us know.
Yes.
All right, that brings us to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Well, thank you, everybody. I know that was a long item, but I thank everyone for their comments and moving through it as quickly as possible. The meeting was a little bit long, but I think we got a lot accomplished. So thank you to all, and thank you to our members of the public for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.